If I asked you which psychiatric disease has the highest mortality rate, what would you guess? Now, come on, take a guess. Would you have guessed that it was eating disorders? But wait, aren't you thinking, aren't those just like intense diets? Fads or social trends that people, mostly women, get into so they can look like people in the magazines? Wrong. Unfortunately, eating disorders have been stigmatized to seem as though it is only, and just only, a social problem. One that is mainly caused by societal pressures to be thin and beautiful. But what if I told you that it wasn't just that? Let's start from the beginning. Evidence of eating disorders, though seem to be relatively new in history, have been found as early as the 4th century. However, most cases found in early history have been linked to religious reasons rather than present-day eating disorders, which are rooted in the desire to be thin. In the present day, according to the DSM-5, there are 8 formally characterized eating disorders: pica, rumination disorder, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, binge eating disorder, other specified feeding or eating disorder, and unspecified feeding or eating disorder. We will focus, however, on anorexia nervosa and bulimia nervosa. Characteristics of anorexia nervosa include continuously restricting oneself from food, intense fear of gaining weight, disturbance in experiencing one's own body weight, i.e. lack of understanding the seriousness of one's own illness. Characteristics of bulimia nervosa include recurrent episodes of binge eating, eating way more than one without an eating disorder would, recurrent inappropriate ways of compensating for that binging, i.e. purging, which can include self-induced vomiting, taking excessive amounts of laxatives or use of diuretics, or even overexercising. These episodes have to occur at least once a week for 3 months. And lastly, self-evaluation of oneself, heavily influenced by body shape and weight. Okay, so we can define them. Cool. But what are causing eating disorders? Sure, it is easy to solely blame social media, especially with it being so accessible to young people, and most typically young women. Today's messages of large butts and thigh gaps are easy to point the finger at, but according to research, media doesn't have as big of an effect as you might think. So what else is causing eating disorders? More likely, the root causes of eating disorders lies in genetics, temperament/personality traits, and imbalanced neurocircuitry of the brain. For an eating disorder, it has been found that genetics can account for up to 50 to 80% of the risk of developing an eating disorder. Think about that for a second. 50 to 80%. Temperament and personality traits such as comorbid anxiety disorders, interoceptive deficits, and having a perfectionist and or obsessive-compulsive personality can all predispose one to an eating disorder. Lastly, neurocircuitry. In the brain, there is the ventral limbic reward circuit, necessary for identifying and evaluating reward stimuli and responding to them. There is also the dorsal cognitive circuit, necessary for decision-making and inhibition. In a person with an eating disorder, these networks in the brain are imbalanced. People with anorexia nervosa and bulimia nervosa experience a different reward sensitivity to stimuli, while they differ in inhibition and control. In a person with anorexia nervosa, their dorsal cognitive circuit has an abnormally high inhibition response when it comes to food, while the opposite is true for a person with bulimia nervosa. With having these predispositions, added social pressures could aid in pushing one to really internalize the thin ideal, leading to body dissatisfaction and eventually eating disorder behavior. So why is this important? Because eating disorders have the highest mortality rate among any psychiatric disease. Why are eating disorders so dangerous? First off, having an eating disorder affects every system of the body: cardiovascular, fluids and electrolytes, neuropsychiatric, GI, reproductive, musculoskeletal, hematologic, head and neck, dermatologic, respiratory, and dental. The cardiovascular system is particularly affected, leaving the number one reason for death among people with eating disorders as cardiac arrest, leaving suicide as the second most common reason for death among eating disorders. Eating disorders are no joke, and not just a fad. It is not just a social issue, but a brain disease that can be prevented and caught early before serious medical consequences begin. With the spread of knowledge about the facts about eating disorders, more research can be done and will be used to help treat those with this illness. Spread the word.
Created using Toon.